sir.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. We continue to hold remote meetings while the governor's executive order continues to be in effect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to remind our citizens that they can submit questions for items on today's agenda. Public comments may also be submitted at this time, and they will be read at the appropriate time during the meeting. Comments will be accepted up to the conclusion or vote of the item. Comments can be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website under Agendas and Minutes. Go to video streaming, you will see a button to submit your comments. And also, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, any comments in the comments section on Facebook Live, we're not able to comment on live. The meeting is called to order. I'll ask the city clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, when I call on your name, can you please state that you are present and that you can hear us? Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
I'm here.
Council Member Goebel.
Present.
Council Member Kendrick.
Here.
Council Member McClellan.
Here.
And Mayor Wells is absent today.
Thank you. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a brief moment of silence? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
stands,
one
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the October 13th, 2020 meeting and the agenda of the October 27th, 2020 meeting in accordance with state law, council, and housing authority policy. We have one presentation on today's agenda. I would like to invite Director of Recreation Frank Carson to tell us about this.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ortiz, for having me. I want to show you a brief video on our virtual ribbon cutting of the North Marshall Dog Park. It's our first virtual ribbon cutting that we've been able to do. We did have 3 dog owners. So we had City Manager Graham Mitchell, Mayor Bill Wells, and Council Member Steve Goebel brought their dog, or dogs, multiple dogs, to their own virtual ribbon cutting as part of it. I do want to also thank Danielle Xavier and Ben Campus from the Humane Society for participating in the ribbon cutting, as well as Kyle Kennedy from the Urban Corps of San Diego County. Urban Corps helped secure that grant with Toro, the $40,000 grant, to renovate this area into like a mini dog park and some other fun areas for our community to hopefully enjoy in the future. But also, this was a large effort once again by our engineers within Public Works and Public Works itself that really wanted to see the success of this, and they did a lot of extra efforts, a lot of their own volunteer time to make sure that this was successful. That's why we wanted to make sure we also highlighted Sinan Kachi in this. We're hoping to get Jeff Manchester and Yasmin in it. We're just going to get the timing right. So here we go. Let's see if this works.
Turn up the volume.
So that was it, our first attempt at a virtual ribbon cutting. Sorry if you couldn't hear the mayor talk there. I was still playing with it, but I know our staff were trying to figure out how to put all 7 into one screen. That was the closest we could get to get everybody timing, getting that ribbon cutting just right. But our first virtual ribbon cutting went off with not too much of a hitch there. And that concludes my presentation for the day.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. And thanks for all your hard work. You guys are definitely tapping into the creativity during COVID, so I appreciate the extra effort.
Thank you.
Agenda changes. Does staff have any agenda changes?
Mr. Ortiz, we have no changes.
Council members, do we have any agenda changes?
No.
Perfect. We're now at consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, would you like to pull any consent items?
I'd like to pull item 5.
Item 5, okay. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Item 5 is the investment policy, and I have a question for city staff. Let me grab that 1 second. My question is, while it may not currently be the case, could the city invest in bonds or other investments of tobacco or liquor companies?
Mr. Goebel, I'm going to have Clay Shane, our finance director, respond to some of those details.
Yes, sir. Technically, the way the investment policy is currently written, there is no prohibition on investing in any particular business type, although it would be unlikely that that would cross our desk for a possible investment opportunity. It is technically allowable as currently written.
And to some degree, when we invest our PERS money, PERS already has kind of a restrictive list based on social policy that people at the state have made, correct?
CalPERS does invest by a different set of rules than we do. Their investment decisions are made by board decisions, and I know they have been very actively reviewing those policies and trying to pull back from their practice over the last few decades of socially investing. However, like I said, they do play by a different playbook than the rest of us, and they do make those decisions on the fly at the board level.
So I guess my question to my fellow council members is, should we put any kind of restriction of using city investments for investments in debt service, such as bonds, in tobacco or liquor companies in specific? A discussion on the pros and cons.
Council?
Yeah. I would think that would be a good idea, because we're really trying to keep tobacco and alcohol out of the hands of minors, and the Center for Disease Control tells us that 50% of the tobacco users will die as a direct result of smoking tobacco. And I think that's a dying industry in more ways than one. You know, my feelings aren't as strong on alcohol, but certainly there are no redeeming qualities to tobacco.
Bob, did you have something?
I would also say that marijuana would be another thing not invest.
Yeah, I'd agree with Bob on that.
So is this something that we need to vote on, Graham, or is this just direction with regard to investment strategy?
Well, I think with Mr. Goebel, if the rest of the council concurs, I think we'd have to have a policy, a written policy around that. I would that there may be more complicated than just thou shalt not invest in alcohol and in tobacco and marijuana companies. So what I would recommend is, if that's what council would like us to do, I'd recommend that you actually approve the investment policy update, or just receive the report. It's not a vote item. Adopt the resolution that's part of that report, and then give some direction to staff to come back with a modified, and we would do that in the next couple months. But I'd want to see how other cities are handling that and make sure that we do it in a prudent way, if council's okay with that approach.
Okay. Councilman Goebel, how does that sound?
I'm fine. What are your thoughts? I've heard the other two guys' thoughts.
That's fine with me. I think if we could get more information on it with regard to how we would effectively police that, or would be prudent that we get the full picture before we pull the trigger on things.
So I think the consensus is tobacco and marijuana.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
to Graham's point, we would like to see some work on that. I would suggest, I like putting deadlines on things, so I'd like to see something back in 4 months. That should get us through the holidays. Is that enough time?
Yeah, we could do that.
So November, December, January, by March 1st. Some information on that. And including, I would also put a sunset on that. In other words, this policy, if this is something that we adopt, we should, I don't like open-ended things. So I'd say like a 10-year or through the end of the decade, you know, and then January 1st, 2030, another council should have the option to renew it or let it die. But so I would suggest staff look at a 10-year or the remainder of the decade.
We can certainly do that. Remember, you do review this updated policy periodically, so you get this in front of you. So we'll give you a couple of different options for you to consider.
Okay. So with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the entire consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second? Move a second.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, we received no comments for consent items. And Deputy Mayor Ortiz, may I have your vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Great. Thank you. We're next at public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, Successor Agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions. An item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, sir. We received one comment from Ms. Stephanie Harper, and it reads, I try to be the most honest person I can be. Although some find this harsh, it is not me, but the truth that is harsh at times. It is a quality that I like about myself. When you lie, you have to remember that lie and accommodate for whatever that lie may bring your way. That is a good reason to stay honest. But for those who can't, laws were created. Like take, for example, Measure S, passed so that citizens would be represented by someone who lives in their district. I have asked the FPPC, and they said it was up to the local laws on elections to determine whether or not it's a crime. So I would like to know what our laws are on this subject and exactly what is the law that was enacted by Measure S. End of comment. And no other comments were received.
Thanks, Angela. This is I think the second meeting that we've had comments about individuals not living within the district or the city that they're running in. Morgan, can you shed some light to what our laws are and whose ultimate authority would be?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The charter the amendment that was approved by the voters created the districts for our election purposes. And in that charter, it provides that the candidates must come from the district. There were two options that were presented to the council when you put this on the ballot. One is that candidates can come from outside the district but be elected only by the voters in the district. You chose the other one, which is not only is are these candidates voted by the members of the district, the electors in the district, you must come from the district as well. I think the criticism is that there may be questions about one or more candidates and whether they are residents within the district that they are seeking the office from. And that is a question that we do not have we are, I guess the proponent is seeking us to take some sort of action to prevent an election of a candidate. It's been unspecified so far. However, it's my opinion that the court would not stop the election. The court would then require, if the person that's being challenged is in fact elected to office, then the court would require us to go through what is called the quo warranto process. We've discussed this before. You have to get leave to sue from the Attorney General, and then that person can sue to remove somebody from office if the Attorney General believes there's enough evidence to show that that person is not a resident of the district. So that kind of gives you, in a nutshell, the options. Like I said, the pre-election challenge, in my view, is not going to take anybody off a ballot or keep them from office, but a post-election challenge would be the process somebody could take. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer that.
Yeah, Gary, you have a question?
Morgan, is that a criminal penalty?
No, it's a civil action to remove somebody from office. So it's not a criminal prosecution. And the council could be the group that wants to see quo warranto. It'd be up to the majority of the council at that time, too.
So at this point during this election cycle, there's a week away, there's no real action that can be taken. But post-election, there could be some form of legal action taken should that person win.
That's correct.
Okay. Graham, is there, obviously the integrity of our elections is paramount, and we want someone representing the city to live in the city. Is there anything that can be done locally to ensure, people running for office are, what do we do currently, and what is the verification process?
That's a good question. Right now, I believe our municipal code, and I'm going to ask Ms. Cortez to jump in if I get this wrong, but our municipal code requires an individual to show that they're registered to vote in that district. So it means they've shown the registrar of voters or have indicated to the registrar of voters that where their residence is. In fact, Ms. Cortez shared with Mr. DiMaggio and I this morning some things that other cities have been doing that she's doing some research on, where in addition to register a voting, you need to show driver's license, utility bills. You show that if you want to send your kid to a local school. So you think for council, maybe that's something, it's a low bar. We may do some more exploration on that. Ms. Cortez is doing that work right now, and if it makes sense, I think we'll bring something back to the council sometime in the spring for you to consider.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. Just to ensure the public's trust that we have it, and we're doing our part as a city to make sure that we're keeping the integrity of our election. So thank you.
A question.
Yeah.
If they have to show a driver's license and other things when they start, I didn't have to show maybe I did. I don't remember. It's been so long. But I don't know if you have to show your driver's license when you office and make you're in that district.
No, you do. Right, Mr. McClellan, right now you do not. You just show that you are actually, we verify that you're registered to vote in that district. So we'll look at your voter registration, and if it's within the district, then you're eligible.
Well, you can register for any district you want to put on your registration card.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we need to, I think that'd be great, Graham, if we could bring something to council to move into another layer of verification.
Oh.
Okay. Angela, do we have any other comments?
No more comments were received, sir.
There are no written communications, and we have no public hearings on today's agenda. Next is administrative reports. We have 3 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 6 is the adoption of a pension funding policy. Staff, if you want to introduce this item.
Certainly, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the council. For this presentation, I'm going to be joined by our Finance Director, Clay Shane, along with Julio Morales from Urban Futures, who's been acting as our financial advisor as we've been analyzing pension obligation bonds and other strategies to address the city's current pension debt. So the purpose of this agenda item is to present not only this policy, but to give the council an update on or a status report on our pension obligation, and Clay will handle that part, and then we'll conclude with just kind of a preview of what's to come regarding pension obligation bonds. In fact, we'll be presenting an item at the next council meeting, or a December meeting. It's one of those meetings coming up soon on actions to take. So there'll be a little bit more information, but Julio Morales from Urban Futures will kind of give us a preview of that upcoming agenda item. So as a reminder, this is just an item that's been brought up over a series of items dealing with pension funding. And again, there'll continue to be items into the future. But before I kind of jump into the pension funding policy, I did want to remind the council of kind of how we got here, and maybe some background information that would be useful for the council. I think El Cajon, like most cities, have been experiencing a dramatic increase in our pension costs. And I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of different reasons for this, and a lot of those reasons are things that occurred before the city council, before any of you were even on the city council. And as a reminder, our pension costs really come from really two different sources. One, our current obligation for our current employees. We call that our normal costs. And then we also have this unfunded accrued liability, and it's really this debt that has built up over years. And over the years, PERS has realized that the current system that's in place is failing. It's not sustainable. And so our rates have increased over the years, and I'll show you you see a slide now. I'll talk about that in just a second. But our rates have increased over the years, and we have this sort of this rolling financing of this unfunded liability that the city's been paying year after year, and it's about a 20-year rolling pension debt, and PERS charges about a 7%. Well, right now a 7% interest rate on that. So it's a pretty large debt, and it does hamper the city's ability to do some of the things that we want to do. It's important to note that this debt, unlike your home mortgage, for example, you have a fixed home mortgage, and every year as you pay that down based on the interest rate, your overall principal goes down year after year. There's a lot of factors that go into this unfunded liability. Has to do with actuarial data, has to do with things associated with how well the stock market performed, all those things. So our actual actuarial debt changes from year to year. So when we get the slide back up, I just wanted to show you the last 10 years worth of, looks like Clay's feverishly looking to get that back up. But I wanted to show what we've been paying for the last 10 years in pension debt. And now this is a reminder, this is not just general fund, this is the entire city. General fund has the majority of that, but this is our overall pension debt. So Mr. Shane, you got that? So, okay, perfect. So this slide shows how much debt we've been paying, the increase in debt since 2011. So as we're coming out of the recession, as you can see, it's a pretty dramatic increase in our pension liability. In fact, if you were to look at our increases in revenues, it's probably fair to say that any increase in revenue has gone straight to paying off pension debt. So any surpluses monies we've received over the years has really gone to that. And that prevents the city from doing some of the things that we'd like to do. And frankly, this is not a unique El Cajon thing. This is almost every city in the state of California thing. So a lot of cities are starting to look at some of the strategies that we've been looking at in the past few years. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this takes that 2000, imagine the graph that you had just seen before. It started with fiscal year 2010-11, and then we kind of end with fiscal year 2021, 10 years apart. It shows the general fund's overall expenditures along with the CalPERS contribution. So you can see, 10 years ago, 16% of the general fund expenditure was going towards pension obligations. And this year it's 23%. That doesn't sound like a huge percentage increase, but if you look at the dollar amount, it's just astronomical. We were paying $8.2 million in pension costs a decade ago, and now we're up to $17.8 million. That's just a huge amount of increase over the years. In fact, we have no other expenditure increasing at that rate. Again, one of the reasons why we think we need to start tackling this a little more aggressively. We can go to the next slide. This next slide shows what we project out, and I should say not what CalPERS projects out for the next decade. So you can see that increase isn't as dramatic, but what this doesn't include any actuarial changes, doesn't include any other blips in the market, it doesn't include any additional debt that may come on. So we have a feeling that this chart, although deceptively flat, will end up looking a little bit more like the first chart that I showed. Year after year, we'll be getting some increases. I cannot foresee in the near future where we'll actually have a drop, as it's shown in fiscal year 24-25, in our actual pension costs unless we do something different than we have been doing over the years. So we can go to the next slide. So as a reminder, we're presenting this pension funding policy, and as we presented some of these different plans of how to finance our pension debt, pension obligation bonds in particular, one of the things that the council asked staff to do is come back with an actual funding policy. I think it's important that we have a policy that not only gives direction and some structure and some policies for the existing city council and the existing staff, but also for the future. I think it's important to remember that this is some discipline that we're going to have over the years in order to free up revenue and free up resources to do things that the city that our residents expect from us. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to highlight some of the big provisions of the agreement. So one is we have a section there that says that the city will actually make all of its payments. And I know that may sound silly that, yeah, of course we'll make our payments, but we thought it's important that it's a practice that we've made over the years. We've never missed a pension payment, and I think it's a practice that we think that the council should commit to doing into the future. We also think that setting a target of a funding level makes some sense. We are very far away from what's in the plan. It's the funding target we're recommending is 90%. But I think if we have this in mind, if this is something that we're trying to seek, it will help us be more disciplined as we have reserves, as we have surplus money, as we have one-time money to allocate those funds toward reaching that goal. But having that goal also gives the council some flexibility, and I'll talk about that in actually about 2 slides. You can go to the next slide. We also think that there's some value in the council having a formal presentation annually about where we are, sort of the state of our pension, and we would recommend that be done as an annual presentation at a public council meeting where we talk about the new amortization levels, and then if there are some budget considerations that we need to think about, we can start working on those well in advance of the budget so we can plug those in to the next budget. This way, this huge cost will help drive some budget decisions in the future rather than it being an afterthought. So we think that we should be thinking about that first and then thinking about other things that we'd like to purchase second. Next slide. We also think there's some value in having an actual statement in the policy that talks about reserve funds, that talks about savings that have been created from an alternative pension financing program like a pension obligation bond, one-time monies, that there is a real consideration of using those funds specifically towards paying down any pension debt that we have. Now, this is a thou shalt. It's not one of those statements because we think the council does need flexibility. We think that the city needs flexibility as we hit an economic downturn. Maybe it's not prudent to use those. Laying off 10 police officers may not make as much sense as paying down some debt. But we think the shall endeavor is some strong enough language that gives staff the direction that we think we need to present a budget that we think meets the intent of the city council. Let's go to the next slide. We've been talking about setting up a Section 115 trust. We think that the policy should probably address that. At the last council meeting, you saw some budget allocation of some monies towards that Section 115 trust. And as a recollection, we can put any reserve monies, any surplus monies, any one-time monies into that. My light went out. I was too still. We can put any money into that trust fund, and that becomes a trust. That trust becomes a protected box. And so, as monies go in there, they can only be used for pension-related costs. So you can't use them to paint murals or to give raises to staff, for example. Next slide. It also addresses the ability to consider pension obligation bonds, but rather than just saying the city should think about these, it actually gives some very specific items that we need to evaluate pension obligation bonds by. That it talks about some specific elements that should be in the structuring of the POBs. It talks about how we shouldn't be financing normal costs. That this should only be financing old debt or unfunded pension debt and not paying for ongoing operational costs, which some cities have done in the past. It talks about that there must be a demonstrated cash flow saving. So it doesn't make sense to issue $30 million in bonds if you're saving 1%. So there should really be a demonstrated savings. And then ultimately taking the savings from those POBs and putting them back into paying down debt makes a lot of sense. So we've actually included that statement in two different sections of the policy because we think it's that important of a thing to remind ourselves and to have some discipline in that area. The last slide that I'll talk about is in the event that the city has a super funded status for one of its pension plans, which, by the way, I don't foresee that happening anytime soon unless the stock market goes crazy for the next 10 years. But in the event that does occur, and what that means is we're so well funded that PERS no longer charges us or massively reduces our pension costs. Some cities in the past, including the city of El Cajon, when we were super funded decades and decades and decades ago, we would use those funds to give either more benefits that we couldn't afford or to stop paying making any contributions. We would recommend, in the event that happens, that we continue to contribute to our program, so that in the event of a downturn, we have that reserve available. And we continue to pay down any debt with that. So again, I don't see us getting into a position where we have a super funded pension plan, but just in the event that we do, it gives the council some impetus for staying true to maintaining our pension system intact. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Shane, who's going to go over our pension status report, and then Mr. Morales, who will talk about where we're at with our pension obligation bonds. They'll come back to me and we'll answer any questions that the council may have. So with that, Mr. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Good afternoon, Honorable Deputy Mayor and distinguished members of the City Council. Thank you for your patience during our navigation problems, or rather my navigation problems. So presented as a component of the proposed pension funding policy is a component to bring to the City Council on an annual basis an update on the status of the two pension plans. Typically, we receive a new valuation report from CalPERS, usually between July and October each year, so that is pretty regularly will fall during the fall season. It's the perfect time to get out ahead of other decision making and perhaps in conjunction with our first quarter report. So it's a wonderful time to sit down and really focus on this. One of the primary components is the information presented on this slide. And I recognize this is a very dense slide and contains a lot of information, but I wanted to present it in this way so I could talk through a couple of things here. A lot of the bottom line that most people go to when they're talking about pensions has to do with that fourth column from the left, the unfunded column. That is our unfunded pension liability and the status. But it's important for us to understand what contributes to that balance and how it changes over time. There really are two sides to this equation. The total liability, and that is the benefits that our employees have earned over time and that they're entitled to. And there's also the assets, which are the monies that we have set aside to pay those benefits, the difference of which is the unfunded liability. Each sides of that equation, the liability and the assets, both move independent of each other for a variety of reasons. For example, the liability may change because we've increased or decreased staffing, we've given or not given raises, people live longer or less long. Things like that will contribute to changes in the liability. On the asset side, investment earnings are the big players there, as earning more or less than the target amounts will drive that change as well. And of course, as benefits are paid, it will affect both columns. So it's important to understand what is driving that unfunded liability. It's very rarely a single thing. It's usually a basket of multiple things all changing at one time. Pension plan management is a very dynamic thing to undertake and has many components. From our last valuation, which was as of June 30th, 2018, we can see that the total unfunded liability has increased by approximately $3 million. And you, of course, see changes on both sides of that equation. And our funding status has improved from 63.8% to 64.2%. Part of this is the addition of new amortization bases. Each year, when the actuaries recalculate our liabilities and assets, they recognize that events have occurred that have caused them to miss the targets for a number of reasons. And that's added to our amortization table, which is basically a breakdown of the unfunded liability. Both of our plans had 2 lines each this year, comprising of investment gains and losses, that is above and below the target earnings amount, and non-investment gains and loss, which is pretty much everything else that'll affect the plan. In total, the net is about an increase in the liability as a result of this activity by approximately $1 million. The majority of the rest of it is due to the interest on the previously existing amortization levels. And I just want to mention one thing here, that even though this is $1 million increase through this amortization level, this is half of 1% of the unfunded liability and 17% of 1% of the total liability in the fund. So these kind of numbers is pretty much a best case scenario of what we could expect for new amortization basis. This is pretty much a flat scenario. An additional component straight out of the actuarial reports is this graph, and I really like this presentation. I should clarify here, I like the efficiency at which this presents the information, not necessarily the story it's telling. What this is a 20-year history of investment returns from CalPERS. Each year shows its individual returns. Above 0% is above the line, and obviously if it's a loss, it's below the line. However, this is somewhat misleading because the whole plan is built on the expectation that the plan is going to earn, at the current time, 7% investment going forward. So realistically, the right way to look at this is not necessarily above or below 0, but above or below that thin blue line, which represents the discount rate at that time. In fact, future versions of this report, I may alter it to demonstrate that. One thing that's interesting here, just to express some of the frustrations I've had with this information over time, if you notice the dotted line, that's a 5-year rolling average of CalPERS returns. And if you notice how much time that line spends below the blue line that's expected, and that's helped to contribute to that unfunded liability. Additionally, each actuarial report prescribes the following year's required adjustments or payments to CalPERS. These are expressed as separate components for normal cost, which is the current year's cost of new benefits, as well as the amortization of the unfunded liability. Now, that FY22 number is the published required number for next year's budget. However, the following years are purely informational and are projected. In the very next actuarial report, there may or may not be new amortization levels that will affect that number, but as of what they have right now, that's their best estimate of what we will experience going forward. As you can see, normal cost for both of the plans is fairly consistent over time. I would not expect to see very many scenarios where you see that change dramatically year to year. Most of our focus is the unfunded liability amortization, which you can see for each of the plans there. In FY22, the unfunded liability payment is approximately $16.5 million, and that is about $6.5 million less than the projected total contribution we're anticipating for FY22 of approximately $23 million. That is pretty much the meat and potatoes of the proposed pension status report. Changing our focus now, looking forward a little bit to the pension obligation bond schedule. I'd like to introduce Julio Morales. Julio is our municipal advisor to assist us with pension strategy and help guide us through the potential issuance of pension obligation bonds. So with that, I'd like to introduce Julio.
Thank you, Clay, and good afternoon, everyone, Mayor, members of the City Council. I have to really commend staff. They did a great job in summarizing and actually added a great component to for superfunded to your pension funding policy. So we've been working for several months with the staff, and of course I've made a couple presentations to the council. If you recall, the last time we came and obtained authorization to go through a validation proceeding, which gives you legal authority to issue bonds under a refunding provision. In other words, it allows you to issue these pension obligation bonds without having to go to get voter approval like most bonds, and that validation will come due on November 8th. So we will have the ability to issue pension obligation bonds legally on that date. And on November 10th, we're going to come back to the City Council and ask for the final approval to issue pension obligation bonds. And at the same time, you're going to approve the preliminary official statement, which is an offering document that we send out to investors. And it states summary information about the city, its financial standing, its financial audited statements, as well as other information about the plan of finance. So that's the next month in short order. We'll be coming to you for that approval. In order to issue the bonds, we're going to need to get a rating from Standard & Poor's. This is standard practice. We will have a presentation on the 12th is what we're scheduled, I think, for 2 o'clock. So we hope to be somewhere in the AA category. It's important to get the strongest rating. This is like the equivalent to your credit rating, right? Great credit rating, better mortgage. And it's the same thing on the city's behalf. The stronger the rating, the lower the debt. In fact, today I just finished pricing the city of Arcadia, who had a AAA rating, and they had a phenomenal rate. So I think in this market and kind of with some of the volatility, the rating is really going to be critical. We hope to receive our rating from the rating agency by the end of the month of November, and then hopefully price the bond sometime in December. So this transaction should be closed by year end. However, I should note that we've been having conversations with city staff about the volatility in the market. So we're hoping to get authorization to sell the bonds as soon as possible, and then kind of play it by ear, both on the underwriter who was selected, which was Bank of America, and ourselves gauging the market trends and seeing what would be the best time and the most ideal time and the amount and structure to issue at that time. That's all that I have regarding that. Any questions? I hand it back to you.
Thank you, Julio. So, council, any questions about we kind of put three different presentations into one, but as you recall, we're the council is considering the actual policy. So we can answer questions about any of those topics, but we would like to come back at some point and address the funding policy.
Question. Basically what we're doing is we're going out to have a bond to pay off pension obligation bond or obligation, basically at a lower rate, like maybe 3% or 2.5%, which is market rate at this time, just about. Federal government's at like 0.25%, and then we use that to pay down our pension obligation of 7%. So we have a difference of about 4%, let's say, that we can use to pay down our pension obligation quicker. And that's what you basically said, right, Graham?
That's exactly right. You probably know people that have refinanced their home, taken the savings and gone out and bought a toy like a boat or a motorcycle, right?
Well,
we're recommending we won't be buying any boats. We would recommend we put that back into our mortgage. So that's the goal, and that's what the pension funding policy does. It gives the council the discipline to do that.
Yes.
Any other questions, council?
I might add one last thing. That pension funding policy needs to be adopted by the council prior to you going to the rating agency, because we believe it's a critical element in your rating plan. So knowing and stating that you've gone through the process and adopting it and gone through a council workshop to go over it is really critical. It's a critical step in your rating.
What's the estimate of what the bond charges?
I anticipate if you're to obtain a AA rating, you'll be somewhere, I hope, in the low to mid threes, which is cutting your interest rate in half if you take it.
Right. It's kind of like buying solar and paying half what you do to the gas and electric.
Yeah, a lot of people liken it to taking one credit card and another one that's at half. You still will have payments, but as Graham stated, you place yourself in a much better position, and hopefully you take those savings to pay down your mortgage further.
Right.
Council, Steve, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I've got some questions. Can we go back to slide 11? Normal costs. Bullet point number 2, shall not finance normal costs. Is normal costs are normal costs non-pensionable costs, or are these the normal costs of administering the pension obligation bond program?
So there's two different. Remember, our annual CalPERS payment is made up of two different components. One is that unfunded actuary liability, or the unfunded liability, right? And that's really what the POB should be paying down. The other is what the city's contributing to pay for existing employees' debt. It's really our operational costs. So it's like when you hire somebody, you pay them a salary, you pay them their medical benefits, and you contribute to their pension costs. What we're recommending is that any POBs that are done do not help pay for those basic, what I call operational costs. So the city's contribution for my pension, for example, should not be financed, because now we're just financing a future debt. So it's really only the unfunded liability that's being financed.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's go back to slide 17. So one of my questions is, we have an election next week on the 3rd, and I'm trying to figure out the steps here. on November 10th, is that the last time we're going to vote on something?
The last
Well,
time I will.
We would recommend, yes and no. We're going to seek some direction from the council of, and I haven't gone over this with Julio, but typically what we would do is we would ask for what's the minimum threshold we need to get to in order to pull the trigger. And the bond market does not fluctuate that great from day to day. But if the council sets a minimum, then we know when we can hit it. The other thing is, as Mr. Morales said, we are working with Bank of America, and they're watching the market closely, and we would recommend when to do that. Now, if we do come back to the council and recommend that we do this in some phases, we don't have to issue all the debt at the same time. There will be other times where we come back to the council for additional direction. But Julio, will you also indicate or verify if the council gives direction to issue POBs on at what point? Like, how many times will we be coming back to the council to get authorization?
You only needed, you got authorization, you asked for authority legally through the validation. And we said we'd come back on this date to get final approval of the official statement. That's the most critical thing. The city council has to say, we've reviewed this, or staff has reviewed it, and the facts inside this offering statement are correct, and then they will give you guidance on issuing bonds. Typically, and we've been doing this a great deal, council gives general directions, as you stated, a minimum, a maximum, an objective, and then they let the details, because the market moves second to second. I can tell you today, we had our final pricing, and then rates were so attractive that we issued a few more bonds, but we stayed within the guidelines set in the staff report. Staff report said $90 million for Arcadia. It ended up being 85 because the interest rates were so low, so we bumped up and reduced a little bit more of their liability and made it 90 million. So I think what we're hoping is that council is going to give you general direction or guidelines as to how you proceed, but the specific implementation, timing, exact amounts, how many times you go, typically is left up to a staff level decision.
And I understand that, so thank you. I will be looking to staff to say, so here are the guidelines that we recommend. A minimum interest rate, a maximum interest rate, first tranche amount of money. We can't vote blind and just say, well, do what you think is best, because in the end, the council is accountable to the people for voting for a good deal. So I guess I'm expecting on November 10th that we're going to have some kind of detail what we're voting on in general, rates, amounts. Does that make sense?
Certainly. I've never gone through a pension obligation process, but I have gone through other debt, and that was similar to what we did with the other types of debt. And Julio, I'm assuming that's probably similar to what you've experienced in other jurisdictions.
No different. It's more detailed and nuanced, and Clay has done a lot of study as a staff. We will come up with specific recommendations and guidelines. Absolutely. That goes without. We actually set limits as to what to not do more and give you guidelines as to our thinking. So we will have it. At this point, we want to give you, and I'll try to make this short, here's what's coming up. So you will have more than enough detail on November 10th.
Do we have any kind of, similar to how we did sewer rates, will we have any kind of presentation to show here's the amount that you expect to save over the next umpty years with this?
We will come back to you after you price the bonds. So right now I'm actually working on the one for Arcadia. I can't tell you exactly what you'll save. We'll give you a general interest. We have to give you, and we'll have to do something as a good faith estimate. We'll provide something. But of course, afterward, once you actually sell the bonds and you move it, we'll come back to council. We'll give you a description of how much you will save and how the sale went, and what next steps might happen.
I think the public would like to know that. They'd like to say, so you're doing all this stuff with our money. Are we saving any money? Is it worth our time? And I think it'll be important for the council to know that information at some point.
Well, I think it's part of the pension or the pension funding policy says we have to show there has to be a demonstrated cash flow savings, right? So in our analysis, we will show, if it makes sense, what that demonstrated amount would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. That's all the questions.
And one more question. If, every few years we have a recession, depending on who wins the election, we could have a boom or a recession, either one. And that might affect the interest rate substantially. So you want to keep your hand on that in the future.
If I may
Is
say,
that right? Is that right, Grant? Graham? Isn't that right? That when we have a recession, interest rates go down?
Well, I'll let the expert address that, because I'll let Julio address that.
there are two things. Interest rates cannot go down very much as far as borrowing. Now, where the market is, that's a different thing, and sometimes they're correlated and sometimes they're not. It's very difficult. But I do believe one of the things that staff prudently looked at is they wanted, one thing is issuing the bonds and you'll get a set rate, but what's a little bit more complex is when you issue pension obligation bonds, there's some risk of giving the money to CalPERS and the market does not perform well that next fiscal year. So what the staff decided, and I think prudently, is they wanted to wait also after the end of the election to see what the investment climate would be. I think one side, as you can say, and I have another client who wanted to issue because they were more concerned by the borrowing rate. I think this staff really looked at it and said, well, we want to see what the market sentiment will be after the election. So hopefully you will have information as what that general direction is. No one knows exactly how the market will perform, but at least you'll know what the results of the election are in a general sense of what the market sentiment is. So we hope to have that information in our rearview mirror so we can make a decision going forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, council? I had a quick question, and I think maybe Julio would be directed to this. So with regard to the example you gave to the other city, Arcadia, receiving the AAA rating, what kind of factors contribute to a city going from AA to AAA? Is it size? Is it financial management plans? What is that? What are the S&P looking for?
Those are excellent questions, and I think it's a long-term process. I've actually taken a few cities, 3 now, that have become AAA rated, Glendora, Pasadena, and Arcadia. It is a combination of 3 factors: sound financial management practices, level of reserves, and often there's the underlying economics as well, which sometimes you can't impact. So cities like Santa Monica and Beverly Hills, I don't have to say much as to why they're there, but there are other smaller cities, and it is the level of reserves, the financial management practices that you take. This is seen as somewhat of a positive will not increase your rating, but as a positive. Having the pension funding policies, studying, doing the level of analysis is going to set you apart from a number of other cities. I have to commend staff. They really think about issues where you may have some of your neighbors who might issue pension obligation bonds, but haven't done the in-depth analysis and thought through the whole process to the extent that staff has done here. That will be viewed as a positive to the rating agencies. Realistically, I anticipate you'll be in the AA category, but it is a great goal, and you have a good staff that can get you to that AAA. You're on your way by addressing this pension liability.
That's informative. Thanks, Julio. And I mean, moving to big picture, we're at about $200 million unfunded liability. I'm assuming that the goal is the goal to get that down to zero, and that's got to be a decades long process, or are we always going to run at a deficit? I mean, can you speak to that a little bit and give us some vision for what this looks like 10, 20, 30 years down the road?
Absolutely. I think there are 2 things, and it's stated in the policy and it's well stated. You hope to get to your goal. Your goal is a minimum of 90% funded, and it's going to move every year. That's the other thing that Clay stated. This is kind of like, I liken the normal cost to your current light bill, and the UAL is this past due bill. You're trying to get current, but I'll tell you, it's a little dynamic. So every year there's some kind of adjustment. CalPERS gives you an adjustment due to investment performance and also life expectancy and the like. So what's important and why you have this policy is for you to keep on top of it every year to understand. I'll give you an analogy. I had a client, very small water client, paid off their entire liability of $5 million. And this year they had $100,000 added on, and we did the projection to say they have another $350,000. So they know now in the next following year they're going to have $400,000. So in short order, if you even pay off that full amount, you may be in another position, and all of a sudden you're surprised. What's going to happen with this pension funding policy is you will no longer be surprised. You'll be doing planning. You're doing exactly what you're doing now and projecting going forward. So the idea is we have a plan, we're going to take these steps, and you're always going to look forward to make sure there's no surprises. So that's why the pension funding policy is in place. That's why staff is doing what they're doing. In the future, you won't get stuck here again.
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Julio. Obviously, this is
I got one.
Oh,
I
yes,
got
Steve.
one final question.
Yes.
So let's say the market prices the bonds at 3.5%, and the PERS is at 7%. The only way, not the only way, it seems like the biggest way this is a bad deal is if PERS drops its rate below, in my example, 3.5%. In other words, why would we borrow at 3.5% from the market if PERS is only going to charge us 2%? But that's a pretty Pollyannic world to say that PERS is going to charge less than 3.5%. That would mean that the return on investments are really strong, isn't it, Clay?
Yeah, I think the odds of that happening are highly unlikely. I think they would have a pretty significant teeth-pulling episode with virtually every city in the state of California to get much below where they currently are anytime soon.
Good. Yeah.
So
That won't happen in my lifetime.
So whether it's 3.5, 3.4, 3.6, 3.2, that's the fine tuning, but this is looking like it's a really good deal.
It's a great deal.
I will come back on November 10th with the risk analysis. I've actually recently developed a Monte Carlo simulation that will come back and give you a sense of the potential outcomes and provide that to the city and some kind of outlook. We will never know what the outcome of investment returns in the future is. If I were a gentleman, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on an island pushing a button. But we can do as much analysis and forethought and implement policies and come back and review and do the most professional thing you can that staff is doing and taking every precaution we can and analysis and quantitative review. That's the best we can do with something like this. And there's an entire industry dedicated to doing this. So I think we're taking the right steps. It does look like a good deal, but we can never guarantee the ultimate outcome.
Yeah, I think the questions you're hearing from the council is partly to let the public know that we're interested, engaged, and aware of this, and not just blindly taking staff's recommendation. And that's good for the public.
Yeah, thank you, staff. It sounds like you've done an extra effort to make sure we're doing our due diligence. Mr. Morales, thank you for everything that you're doing as well. Angela, do we have any comments for this item?
Sir, we received no cards.
If there's not any other further discussion from council, I believe this requires a motion and a vote. Morgan, do we have to, or Graham, do we have to have an individual motion for all these items?
Yes, so the only item that's being considered from a vote perspective is the adoption of the resolution approving
Right.
the pension funding policy.
Right. The rest of that will come back to you, presumably.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So
I'll
move.
make a motion that, I'll second.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Great. The second administrative report, item 7, is to enter into a cooperative agreement with Tyler Technologies. Staff, if you want to introduce the item, please.
Sorry, just had to unmute there.
Deputy Mayor and distinguished council, thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Diaz. I'm the Director of IT, and we're here to talk about the purchase of citywide ERP software. So the first thing that we have to really talk about in such a thing is what in the world is citywide ERP software? So if you think about the city as a business, ERP software is the backbone of everything that we do. It is keeping track of finances, accounts payable, accounts receivable. It's making sure that bills go out, and it also makes sure that payroll checks go out. What's critical for a good ERP software is that it is integrating with multiple applications, and everything is talking to it so that it has the most information to make the best analysis and produce the outputs that we need as a solid city. In our case today, we're talking about finance, human resources, payroll, utility billing, citizen self-service, and employee self-service primarily, but connecting into everything from payroll applications, permitting, and so forth. Okay, so why does El Cajon need ERP software? The real gist of it is, if we don't have this central software talking to all of our systems, we spend all of our staff time moving data between systems, and that's time that we should be spending analyzing, optimizing, and innovating. So what we're doing with this software is making sure that we have the data to make smart decisions, making sure that we're operating at great efficiency, that things are going through the proper approvals for checks and balances, and really making sure that we are doing the right thing. We're meeting all of our regulatory requirements and so forth. So here's our current situation. We've actually had an ERP system for about 20 years. It is the oldest server in our data center right now. The servers are about 10 years old. Our current system, the product ownership has changed several times, and we're seeing in most recently that they're losing a lot of knowledgeable programming and support staff. We attempted to upgrade the system most recently back in 2017. We have not been able to get it up to modern ERP standards, which means that it's acting almost as a standalone finance system, and we're losing those efficiencies that you expect in a modern ERP system. We're not alone. We've got multiple cities that are currently moving away from the product for similar reasons. So time is of the essence. We've got old servers, we've got an old system, and you don't just move into a new finance system overnight. We need to make sure that the data in there is correct, and it will print out the proper things. It interfaces with all the systems. So what we did was we looked at purchasing options. And what we found was that there are competitive procurements that are out there. And in Southern California and California as a whole, Tyler Munis is the system that has most frequently won for agencies of our general size. We reached out to other cities using Tyler Munis, and we also did 8 hours of vendor demonstrations to make sure that it met the needs for those departments that are going to be using this, which actually is almost every single department touches and uses this system. Why Tyler? The biggest thing for an ERP system is that integration with other things. And we're already using Tyler technology software in multiple departments. Our police department uses it for dispatching, public works and community development use it for plans and permits. Our citizen self-service is already up and running and would integrate with it. And our city app is a Tyler product that we awarded through an RFP process. So that critical seamless integration is there. Also, as a existing Tyler customer, we were able to negotiate a deeper discount because we have multiple products, and also because they have worked with us on previous projects. They know how we run our projects, and we were able to lower down the costs of a lot of the project management and configuration by doing that ourselves. And we have a proven track record that we can do that. We can do it quickly, we can do it well, and that's going to save the city hundreds of thousands of dollars for the next couple of years. Just to reaffirm, Tyler Munis and their ERP software, they are used in 128 other government agencies in California. Government is the bread and butter for Tyler. They are the largest company that's really focusing on public sector software, and they offer products in every portion of public sector, from public safety to finance. And they are winning competitive procurement contracts. City of Coronado is a great example. They're going through Tyler Munis implementation right now after an RFP, Redlands as well. All right, that concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions. Just let me know.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Council, do we have any questions on this presentation? Okay, Angela, did we receive any comments for this item?
Sir, we received no cards for this item.
Perfect. If there's no discussion, do we have a motion?
So move.
I'll move. Second.
Bob's beating you both times, Steve.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz, your vote, please.
My vote is yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Thank you, Angela. And the last administrative report, item 8, is a COVID-19 status report. City Manager Graham Mitchell, want to take it away with this one?
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, and members of the council. Let me get this going. So at the last council meeting, the council asked for sort of a status report at every meeting, and I thought it could be an opportunity to just share some data of what's happening in the city and in the county, and kind of talk about some things that are happening from an operational perspective and some of the impacts of the health orders. This first one will probably be a little bit longer than what I'm anticipating in the future, partly because I'm giving a little bit of background information. So the rest will be just more of an update. However, at the conclusion of the report, I am seeking for some feedback from the council of things that they would like to see in a future presentation. So, so as I'm going through this, if there's things that are missing from the report, please let me know. We'll make sure that those are included as well. I've even thought about having maybe some guests in from the county at future dates to talk about some specific questions that you may have. So with that, I want to talk about the data, both in the county and also in the city of El Cajon. We'll then talk about some of the health orders that are in place and the impacts that they're having on the city, and then the city's response. And again, I'll highlight kind of one or two operational issues that are occurring as a result of COVID-19. So this is a table. It's got a lot of data in it, so I apologize. But this is put out by the County of San Diego, and what it does is it shows over this period of time. It's about a month's period of time. It shows the number of reported tests, and that's the bar in green. So how many people were tested on any given date, and then in that little yellow bar below, it shows how many new cases emerged as a result of those tests, and then there's this above this rolling percentage of cases, or the percentage of people that are testing positive. So you can kind of see in a month's period of time how this tracks over. And I'm going to show you a graph that I actually have developed that maybe show this a little bit more clearly. But this has a lot of different data in one slide. This is another slide put out by the county, and this shows how many, since really the beginning of COVID-19, at least in this county, the hospitals, number of people hospitalized new hospitalization admittance per date. So you can see the number of new people that have been admitted to the hospital has dramatically declined since the really big spike that we had in mid-July, as I call the 4th of July bump that we had. About 2 weeks after the 4th of July, we had this massive increase in cases. But ever since then, we've actually had a significant drop in people being hospitalized. And you'll see how that plays out in a second, too. This shows the number of deaths per day that we've had since the beginning of COVID. Again, you see the large spike. Can you guys see my cursor as I do that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. You can see that large spike here, and then again, there's a bit of a decline over time. So this is actually a table that I put together. I actually get well, the county publishes a situational report every single day. And I take some data from that and I put into a pretty large spreadsheet. And I've created what I think is an estimated number of active cases that are in the county. And so it takes out, so it presumes that if I had COVID a month ago, and if I'm still living, then I should no longer have COVID. So it actually tracks the number of COVID cases per day, and people slough off after 14 days. And so based on that, I've created this estimated number of active cases in the city, and this also or the county, and this also shows deaths. So you can see this, again, this really large spike that we had in mid-July, interestingly about 14 days after the 4th of July. But ever since then, we've had this real plateauing since almost mid-August, where we are hovering around that 4,000 mark. And we've gone up above a bit, and then we've dropped below it. But we've been hovering around that area for quite a while. And so the fact that, I'll go back a slide or two, the fact that we're having that same level of about 4,000, but we're having a pretty significant decline in hospitalization rates is pretty accurate from what the data we're hearing. It's mostly, a lot of the new cases are younger individuals that aren't as susceptible to the disease as older individuals are. This just takes the last 30 days of the exact same table I showed and really just shows that we've really hit this plateau of about 4,000. It's not really moving up or down in any way, shape, or form. It will be interesting to see what happens post Thanksgiving, what that data does. But for the last month, death rates and active case rates have been pretty constant, not a huge increase. So I've taken the same amount of data and I've applied it to the El Cajon, city of El Cajon, and this is just city itself. And as you can see, we had that exact same spike around the same time that the rest of the county had. And then we've also actually plateaued. But as you can see, we are having a bit of a spike in the last 4 days, and I'll kind of talk about why I think that's happening right now. I'm going to take that same table. I'm going to just show the last month. You can again see that we were hovering around a little under 100 or around 100, and we really increased to almost 200 at this point. So we receive a confidential report, and I'd love to share with the council, but I've committed not to by the county. But we receive a report that shows where outbreaks are occurring in the city. And I am allowed to share this. The county's given me authorization to share this. But it's happening at about 10 locations in the city, and there's about 63 specific cases. We have 3 locations that are occurring at skilled nursing facilities. And we've had about that number of outbreaks for all the last few months. We have one at a congregate care facility that's not a skilled nursing facility, and then we have 6 community outbreaks, and those range from restaurants to churches to schools. So that's kind of the typical community outbreak locations. And I don't think of all the community outbreaks we have any more than 3 or 4, as I recall. The skilled nursing facilities, some of them have higher rates or outbreaks than others, but it's all over the place. But if you look at 63, that's by the way, this is the most outbreaks we've had community outbreaks we've had since I've started receiving the data. And so I think a lot of the numbers that we're seeing here are actually attributed to the increase of about 3 or 4 locations right now. So we hope that as those go down, as those get under control, that our numbers will get back down again. But if not, we'll be bringing something back to the council for some further discussion. So let me talk a little bit about how the state's operating and how we're being judged and how the health orders work. The state has a plan called the State Safe Reopening Plan. They have some metrics that they judge or analyze every county, and it's based on an adjusted case rate. So really, it's the number of cases that a county has per 100,000 in population. It's adjusted because it's obvious that the more testing that a county does, the more cases that will occur. And so to disincentivize counties from discouraging people to get tested, because then you'll have more rates, the counties that test above this basic baseline that the state would like to see, they actually get an adjusted rate. So their rate goes down. So I'll give you an example. Right now, our unadjusted rate is 7.4. But because we test at a higher rate than the county expects, our adjusted rate drops to 6.5. They also look at positivity rate, so the number of cases per test that occur. And then there's a new judgment or a new area that they're analyzing. It's called the health equity quartile, and they look at the more vulnerable populations in a county. They look at socioeconomic, and they look at persons of color. And if there's a rate, an adjusted rate case or a positivity rate that's much higher with that group than the rest of the county, that will hold the rest of the county back. So a county can't just focus on one group of its population. It has to have a focus on all. So based on the different metrics, counties are categorized into 4 different colors: purple, red, orange, and yellow. I'll kind of share what that means. So if you're purple, you have pretty widespread cases. That means you're above 7% or 7. It means you have more than 7 per 100,000 cases adjusted. It means you have a positivity rate of plus 8%. We're currently in the red. So like I said before, even though our unadjusted rate is 7.4, our adjusted rate's at 6.5. So that puts us well within that rate. And our positivity rate is 3.5. So again, we're well within that. And our equity metric is 5.1. So we are well within the red, but it's still a little ways to go till we get to the orange. This is a map of the state of California. This shows the county of San Diego in that bottom left corner. We are the red. As you can see, we're surrounded by counties that are purple. Purple is more restrictive. In fact, a lot more restrictions that occur. And so you'll hear county health officials and our supervisors talk about not wanting to get into purple, because once you get into purple, there's some pretty draconian shutdowns like the other counties around us are experiencing right now. So right now, the county or the state has a health order, and the county has reflected that order as of October 10th, that up to 3 households are allowed to gather. They're required to be outdoors in their gathering. They're required to maintain distance. They should wear masks. And if they're serving food, there should be a single individual serving food. They've asked that these types of visits are kept short, ideally less than 2 hours. And then that if there is singing or chanting or shouting, in other words, if you're getting together to watch a football game, hopefully under 2 hours, that you'd be maintaining social distance of 6 feet, and that you'd be wearing a face mask if you'd be doing that, if participating in that activity. It has an impact on us, and so restaurants, churches, or places of worship, theaters are to operate at a 25% capacity or 100 individuals, whichever is the lesser of those. Gyms, dance studios, and yoga studios are to operate at a 10% capacity. Non-essential businesses should continue to be shut down and remote work, do work remotely if possible. That's dealing with mostly office type work. Indoor malls are allowed to be open right now at 50% capacity. Bars without food should not be operating. They should be closed. If they do serve food, they need to be at that 25% capacity. And then entertainment venues such as a SeaWorld or the Magnolia are continued to remain closed. So it's having an impact on our community. Per the health code, for any holiday get-togethers, there should be no more up to 3 households gathering, and they should meet all those requirements that the county said. I left the trick-or-treating a little vague because I'll be honest with you, as I read the health code, it's unclear whether it's prohibited or whether it's discouraged. Not quite sure. There's a lot of encouragement of alternative ways of trick-or-treating, but the idea of door-to-door trick-or-treating is not being encouraged at all by the state of California or by the county. LA County is far more restrictive in their model. I have a feeling, and this has sort of been my take as I've been in some calls with the county, I think a lot of people, as a former trick-or-treater, you go, there's a risk-reward, right? And so you're not going to walk and hit 20 doors and only get a rate of return of 1 door. So I think there may be a really low turnout this year just because of the rate of effort that would take to get 1 Snicker bar. And then our businesses continue to operate with limited capacity. And so there is an impact, although as you saw in our last sales tax report, things aren't as bad as we kind of anticipated, but our businesses do struggle to keep up with all the limitations and all the different requirements that they're subjected to. So how has the city responded? We have enacted our CARES Act funds. We've gotten our money out as fast as we possibly can. We've distributed $3.5 million in the forms of business grants through our utility, rent, and now mortgage assistance programs, through our homeless shelters. And we've been, our staff has been adamant of staying open. There are a lot of city halls that shut their doors, physically shut their doors to the public. We kept our doors open. We have limited access to the different floors within City Hall. But if someone needs to come to City Hall to receive service, they have not been denied that service during this, since the beginning of time. Again, if this is going to be an ongoing agenda item, I thought I could just kind of talk about maybe a nuance or maybe one of the different operations that's occurring. And I kind of wanted to focus on a little bit on code enforcement and some of the restrictions that have lightened up on our business community. So I'll kind of spend just a few minutes talking about that. It's interesting since the health order in mid-March came out, we've actually had an increase in the number of calls or complaints about code enforcement violations, about a 10% increase in those violations. And almost all of those complaints are not focused on commercial, they're actually focused on residential. So I think as people are at home and they're in their own neighborhoods more often, they're noticing things. As people have walked a lot more, they're noticing things. And as they do notice, they call us or they use the app to report code cases. So we've been actually having an increase in the number of demand for code enforcement services. I'll also point out that, during this period of time, we have, per the council's direction, we've limited our enforcement on the sign ordinance on our business community. We've allowed businesses to operate into the public right-of-way, onto sidewalks with a temporary use permit, and also into their own parking lots with a temporary use permit. As you recall, this temporary use permit is a no-fee permit. We do think it's important that that there is some order, and the purpose of that temporary use permit is to ensure that public safety is occurring and that there is ADA access being guaranteed and that health codes are being met. So I'll give you a really quick example. We had a restaurant shortly after the order to shut down occurred. They set up a tent in their parking lot, which they could do with a temporary use permit. They did not get one. And in doing so, we realized that their tent was larger than was required without a different type of a permit. And that permit is driven by the state of California, and it's a building permit, or it's not a building permit, but it's a fire marshal inspection. So we asked for that. We were able to work with them and get that. We also noticed that they were blocking ADA access, so we worked with them and we were able to resolve that. We also noticed that they put up a storage pod right along a pretty busy corridor. We looked for some alternative locations to put that. We really couldn't find a better location or work with them to find a better location, so it has stayed there. But this is an example of us sort of taking a business-friendly approach where clearly this business needed to make some changes, and rather than just automatically issuing citations or strict warnings, we made contact, we worked with them, we figured out a plan, and I think it worked out all the best. We ensured public safety, we ensured wheelchair access, and we were able to allow this business to do the best they can given the circumstances that they have. So anyway, so kind of to conclude, as you recall, we have loosened up some of these restrictions on our business community from a land use perspective and some other areas. And assuming COVID doesn't go away instantaneously, I have a feeling that there's going to still be somewhat of a need with our business community for some of these lesser restrictions going into 2021. And we have direction from the council to institute these softer policies through the end of the year. Staff's looking for some feedback from the council of whether to extend that at least to the first quarter of 2021 and just see what happens. And so I just want to throw that out there and get some direction from the council, and maybe the council can help us understand where you would like to go with that as we kind of go to this last slide where we can answer any questions that you may have, receive any additional information you'd like in future presentations, and then again get some feedback on future regulation of businesses going into 2021. So with that, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, time's back to you.
Thanks, Graham. Appreciate it. Very informative. Council, do we have any feedback for staff on which way we want the report to go, or any information that we want included in the future? Yeah, Bob.
I remember Bill coming to the council with a request to have the police not force people to do things. It would take up police time, which takes away from the other activities. Is that policy still in effect, or where are we with that?
Well, I think the way I read the conversation and the direction from the council is since I direct the police chief, from the conversation, I got the direction that council would like us to continue to do what we've been doing, and we have prioritized property crimes and violent crimes higher than that of the health code. And so we have continued to do that. We get complaints on a regular basis about businesses not complying with the health code. We do contact them, but we have not taken a draconian approach toward them. In most cases, a little bit of education goes a long way, and we've been able to get them to comply with the county health orders. But yeah, we're not using enforcement tools, or we've not had to use enforcement tools to gain compliance with the county health code to this date. But I think it's important to recognize if there was a business that was posing a public threat, then as the city manager, I have an obligation to use our police powers to do that, to enforce the codes.
Well, I think we ought to extend that policy as it was brought forward, and so we aren't coming down on all the businesses. Take a light approach and get them to conform, like with the outdoor storage area in the restaurant you mentioned. so what?
If I may,
Didn't
Bob.
hurt anything.
Yeah, if I may, Bob, Graham recited what happened in the past precisely, which was there was a lot of discussion about whether the city council should be directing the police chief or the staff to do much of anything, but you only directed the city manager, the city attorney. I think
Right.
the council was comfortable that the city, through the city manager's direction, has been acting appropriately, and you expected that it would continue to be that way in the future.
Yes, that's it would be motion me if you were looking for a
I
motion.
don't think you need a motion for that, Bob. It's still out there. Graham is still running the city in the manner that he knows that you all are appreciative of, and the
Right.
public is as well. So I don't think you need to take any action on that today.
Thank you. Any other council members?
The items that you want to extend through Q1 of next year, what are examples of those items?
I think probably a lightening of the sign ordinance, especially as the economy comes back. I think there's going to be a lot of grand reopening type of signage. I think having some softening there would be useful. I think the allowance of the no-fee temporary use permit would be useful. I'll be honest, not a lot of businesses have taken advantage of that. So it's not like the city's losing a lot of revenue or spending a lot of staff time that we're recouping those costs. So I think it's a good gesture to make, and I think it encourages businesses to operate even under these heightened restrictions. So those are kind of the two big areas, really more land use related issues.
Weren't there some other things early on that we decided to either defer or waive penalties or late fees on, such as business permit fees or those kind of things? Do you recall those?
Yeah, there's actually two specific ones. One was no late fees on utility, or sewer costs. Since that's gone to the county tax roll, we're not monthly billing or bi-monthly billing. So that's kind of gone away. And then we are also allowing businesses to not pay any late fees on obtaining a business license. They still had to get a business license, but if they had got a late one, they wouldn't be subjected to those late fees.
Yeah, I like continuing both of those gestures through the first quarter. We really don't need to get late fees when people are, in some cases, even wondering if they're going to be in business.
Right.
So any gesture is a good gesture.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Steve.
if you're not going to open.
I would also
Yeah.
add the outdoor dining portion to extend that as well. If restaurants are only at 25% capacity, that outdoor dining is going to be able to get their capacity up. And I feel like as long as the state's still issuing these orders, we as a city have to extend these, policies to help our businesses. So really, it seems like as the state goes, we need to keep that up. Does anyone have any feedback for staff on anything additional to add on this with regard to COVID information? I know one for me is I don't know if they even give hospital capacity.
There's a data point on that. I can use that in the next one.
That might be interesting to see where our hospitals are at, and along with that, what is the normal hospital capacity for this point in time last year, so we can have some kind of comparison. Obviously, the hospitals aren't at 0% capacity. They have to be operating at some form of beds that are being used. So, by comparison, what does that look like? So we can see, where we're at. I think that might be a helpful data point.
I talked to one person connected with the Grossmont, and he said that their capacity is way down, and the number of beds filled is way down, and it's actually costing them to operate because they don't have enough people taking unplanned or planned operations and things like that. They aren't able to utilize their hospitals to the fullest. They're hurting because of the restrictions. And we ought to look at the number of beds. It's in the paper every day. Down 200 and some beds. Today I was reading the paper. It's in the Union Tribune every day. So
Absolutely.
But it was up higher than that, a lot higher than that for a while.
You know, yesterday there were 208 beds for in use countywide for COVID. 67 of those were in the ICU, and we have just under 7,000 total beds available in San Diego County. So it's about 0.3% or something really low is being used for COVID. I have one more item that maybe we want to think about is whether to consider reformatting the downtown area with outdoor dining on a more longer term basis. And that is, you know, what's better, parking spaces in downtown or restaurants being able to open up more outdoor seating in those parking spaces? That certainly makes for an attractive downtown when you got a lot of visible activity and some of the, and maybe it's not just restaurants, it could be other businesses downtown. Maybe they have the ability to set up some kinds of business activities out front. That's not food. Could be clothing or I don't know, but that certainly does add a lot of vitality to a downtown presence. When we really have a lot of parking, we've got a lot of unused parking in front of the police station, and that's just a block away. And so I guess my question to my colleagues in the council is, should we look at that as not a permanent, but a longer than COVID idea for downtown El Cajon to really make the area more vital?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I love that idea. I know there's a lot of cities that are doing that right now. I see videos in New York City where they've taken over the parking spaces, and it's actually created a nice atmosphere being outside. So I'd be open to that, absolutely.
Yeah,
we could send this to staff.
Go ahead, Mr. Goebel.
We could send this to staff and have them give us their thoughts. You know, what days of the week, what kinds of activities, how far, things like that.
By the way, we actually have been exploring this on our own because we're seeing it happen not only in places like New York City, but it's happening in the Gas Lamp, it's happening in Little Italy. City of Escondido has actually eliminated all of its parking in a lane within the downtown, so they've extended restaurants out into the far out into the right of way. So it's happening all over. We think it makes sense. We actually brought it up to the downtown partnership. They really need to be the ones that want to do it. We can create the regulation that would support it. We'll continue to plug away at that, but we think it makes a lot of sense, Council.
Great idea, Steve. Thank you. So this was an informational item only, so no motion or vote is required. There are no commission reports on today's agenda. Item 9 is Mayor Wells' report as submitted. So we're now at activities reports for council members. Councilman Gary Kendrick.
As reported.
Councilmember Bob McClellan.
As reported.
Councilmember Steve Goebel.
As reported.
Great. And item 13 is my activities reports as reported. There are no joint council member reports, no general information items, no first or second readings of ordinances, and no closed session on today's agenda. This brings us to the adjournment. The adjourned regular joint meeting of El Cajon City Council and El Cajon Housing Authority held on this 27th day of October 2020 is adjourned until Tuesday, November 10th at 3 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.